After the release of the first season of The Witcher, there was hype regarding the continuation of the story, of how the second season will be. There were talks about the bad things and the good things of the season, with its inaccuracies regarding some characters or the armors of the Nilfgaardians, but overall, the first season was quite well received. The wait for the second one was not long. 2 years after the release of the first 8 episodes, the second part of the series was released and the story continued to present the adventures of Geralt and Ciri, this time with more people and interests who are connected with the young princess of Sintra. The story of the second season starts exactly where the first season ended, with the outcome of the Battle of Sodden. Geralt, having Ciri in his care, travels to Kaer Morhen in order to train Ciri and to protect her, but Ciri starts to develop more magical abilities. Meanwhile, political conflicts between elves, Nilfgaard and the Brotherhood of Sorcerers, and the Northern Kingdoms start to become more intense, while an old villain from the Witcher's past starts to come back and manipulate certain important people in order to get stronger. On paper, the synopsis sounds like an interesting one. Intrigue, adventure, new villains, politics. Honestly, the series presented a lot of interesting ideas. However, there are way too many things presented in the series that unfortunately are focused on one of those ideas. As I said in the video when I talked about the first season of the series, I am trying not to compare the series with the content from the novels, but I cannot do that without seeing the differences in the story. The second season is based mostly on the third novel, Blood of Elves, and presents elements from the fourth novel, Time of Contempt. However, the first episode of the second season adapts a story from the first novel, making the episode to feel like is a bridge between the first concept of the show, where you had random-like stories that tell you the story of the 3 main characters, to a more linear and natural presentation to the story, with events that occur normally and logically with the context presented. I like that the first episode is based on a short story from the Last Wish novel, because it presents a moral context in which Geralt is forced to be. I like that in this context, Ciri is present because it shows the world of monsters and the world of humans, and it presents the moral, the good and the evil of the worlds in a way. The story is made in a way for Ciri to understand the world Geralt is in, and with what Geralt has to deal with, the world in which she should live and have to learn to make difference between good and evil. This is an interesting idea for an adaptation, and they started the season pretty well. However, the differences start to become more obvious as you pass through the story, and by that I mean from the second episode. There are some changes regarding the fate of some characters that live in the novels, but they are killed in the series. However, the addition of the Witch of the Hut, this old villain that manipulates everyone in order to get what she wants, or the context with the monoliths, that are portals to different worlds where the monsters come from, or the reason and the context of the alliance between the elves with Nilfgaard, are original ideas presented by the producers of the show. I understand why they added those plot points into the season, because the third novel is focused more on how Geralt discovers Ciri's abilities and then sends her to the Temple of Melitele in order to get proper magical training, while Rience is in search of Ciri and Geralt has to stop him doing that, adding of course elements regarding the conflict the world is in. Probably they thought that it is not enough content for 8 episodes and tried to add more things to enlarge the world presented in the show, with political interests and an original villain that is made to be a puppeteer behind certain moments from the story. In my opinion, I think they tried to add more intrigue that is necessary, and in a way, the adaptation was sidetracked a bit. I am saying that because I feel the story was focused more on the development of the political context, and yes, I know the context is quite important in the novels too, but the political context kinda took a more important role in the season. Probably this happened because I feel the producers rushed in a way the story. They tried to add more things that are important and interesting to enlarge and detail the context of the world, showing every side of the conflict, but they are not presented organically. Probably is my perception of the story after all. Knowing the original content, probably I am influenced by this information, but as a viewer, I feel like I am seeing 2 stories in one. The story of the whole world that is happening out there, with the story in which the political conflict of the world is more important, and the story of Geralt and Ciri and their bond, their connection and their adventures. In a way, the show is making the story of Geralt and Ciri to be assimilated into the whole context of the world presented by the producers and be a secondary story, a meanwhile moment in the world, and not as a central story in which the whole world is spinning around. I mentioned the fact that the season presents original content that is not presented in the novels, with the monoliths and with the Witch of the Hut. Those plotlines, I think they are made to differentiate the story from the novels, but also to enlarge the mythology of the Witcher's world. What I really liked about those additions is that, in a way, they kinda mixed properly with what was already presented. And they were intertwined with each other pretty well. The monolith plot was also merged pretty well with the lore of the conjunction. Adding the fact that the monoliths can summon monsters is an interesting twist to the context because it makes the plot more intriguing in a way. And the fact that the witch from the hut, who technically is the main villain of the season because she manipulates her way in order to get her hands on Ciri, is using the monoliths to go back to the Wild Hunt, another important element in the Witcher lore, is a pretty interesting connection, to be honest. If I think a bit more about the whole Witch of the Hut plot, I think it was a bit stretched and not quite explained properly, but in the end, I think it was okay, given the fact it was merged properly with the other ideas. Another thing that was a nice addition in my opinion was the Witcher's customs. It was nice to see a glimpse of their way they live or how they are burying their dead. The way Kaer Morhen was presented was okay, it reminded me a bit of the Witcher games, so I can say that on the Kaer Morhen part of the story, the show was made pretty well. What I didn't like was the whole political context that was presented. The show presents ideas that are just mentioned in the novels, with the elves making an alliance with Nilfgaard, this time in the show, giving a logical reason for it, a reason that deviates from the original concept and giving them a natural reason for vengeance, but also diminishing their whole motivation of reclaiming their land that was taken by force by humans to just pure vengeance for a grieving mother. Or the fact that the sorcerers are starting to gain a political influence after the Battle of Sodden Hill to create a so-called alliance of the North with other kingdoms in order to get Ciri is pretty bad because it kinda makes the Northern kingdoms to be more similar with Nilfgaard than they know. All those political contexts and plot points presented, apparently all of them are connected with each other like in a small spider web. This whole context of political presentation, I understand why they did it, because as it is in the novels, everyone wants to capture Ciri for whatever reasons. The sorcerers want her because she has powerful magic and she is seen as a threat and as a possible tool to get Sintra. The elves want her because of her elder blood. Nilfgaard wants her because apparently Emhyr, the Emperor of Nilfgaard, is Ciri's father, so he wants his daughter back. Even Vesemir and Yennefer want Ciri. Vesemir wants her because her blood is required for the Witcher mutagen and he wants to get more mutagen so the Witchers don't go extinct. And Yennefer wants her to give her to the Witch of the Hut to get her powers back. This whole thing with everyone wants Ciri because of a reason, I don't think that is properly made, honestly. It is way too mischievous. I mean, the elves' reason, I get it in a way. Probably I can understand the sorcerers and Northern Kingdom's reason too as a political tool. I probably can accept Yennefer's reason also because of a desperate and unclear moment of thinking, but Vesemir's reason? That's a big no to me. Vesemir cares for Ciri and that's that. He doesn't want her blood or something. If Ciri is the final hope for the world, he will not sacrifice her at all. He's part of their Witcher family thanks to Geralt. He won't do such a thing, not even in a moment of despair. And the Nilfgaardian reason, honestly, it was revealed too fast. Probably it was better for them to reveal who Emhyr is much later, like it was done in the books. The novel reason for Nilfgaard to hunt Ciri was to get control over Sintra and to gain political stability in the region. Only later it was revealed that Duny wanted his daughter back. If the novel reason was made into the series, it would have been a good reason to show that all the parties of the world are power hungry, no matter the situation or culture, which would make Ciri's story much more interesting, that she cannot trust anyone except for Geralt. Those changes, I think they could have been done better, and leaving aside the novels and seeing just their motivations, they are a bit unrealistic. Definitely they could have done better, but after all, it is their version of the story, so they have the right to do it how they like it. Speaking of changes, I have to say that after the first season, the fans were unhappy with how certain characters looked, and I'm talking about Triss Merigold, of how her hair is and how she looks, that she was not properly presented. Apparently the producers listened to the fans and made her to be more accurate with the novel version and the game version. The same thing happened with the Nilfgaardian armors. In the first season, the armor was all black, and the fans said the armor looked, let's just say, weird, and that it was a bad idea that it didn't look all shiny and gold like it is presented in the novels. So this thing was fixed also. Those changes are a good thing? I like to think that yes, there is a good thing. I like to think that the viewer can see that there is interest from the producers to create a nice show and listen to the criticism of the fans. This thing is just temporary? Who knows? Depends on the way the creators want to present and evolve the series into the future. Another thing that I appreciate, at least as a giggle for the fans of the series, are the small Easter eggs that are in the show and reference the video games. There are 3 of them that I recognize, but probably there are more. The first one is in the court of Kaer Morhen when Geralt and Ciri arrive for the first time at the Citadel and you can see the ribs of the skeleton of a creature. This one might be a reference to the prologue of the first Witcher game, where Geralt has to stop an attack led by the professor on Kaer Morhen, and he is using a frightener to attack the Witchers. The second Easter egg can be seen both in the second episode and the last episode, and is the game version of the Witcher medallion hung on the tree from the Great Hall of Kaer Morhen. The last one is just mentioned, but can be heard during the discussion of Geralt and Ciri and Yennefer regarding the unicorn Yennefer had and she and Geralt broke the unicorn. And if the viewer played the Witcher 3 game, he kinda knows what they might talk about. Those things along with the changes are making the series to be friendly with the lore and to recognize what was created before. It's nice they started to bring elements from the games too on the TV screen. Let's see if in the future there will be more references to other elements from the games. I kinda like those types of things. I talked quite a lot about the differences between novels and series, about what was interesting or annoying to me during the second season. I don't know why, probably because that is what impressed me mostly, at least in the context of the story. However, I think it's my fault if I do not talk about what might be important for this season. I'm talking about the development of the main characters. I like how each and every one of them evolved to a point that you really appreciate them more. Geralt instantly became a parent, a protector for Ciri, evolving from the lone wolf type of guy to the point that he will protect her from everything that might be dangerous or inappropriate. Ciri started to gain confidence in her, but at the same time she became a little stubborn, wanting her to prove herself and to Geralt that she can handle things. Yennefer had to deal with something that she didn't face before. She became powerless and had to find a way to get her powers back, to not feel as vulnerable as before she learned she could do magic. So in a desperate moment she agrees to do a bad thing, only to realize that what she does is bad only when she sees Geralt being connected with the girl she was supposed to give to the Witch of the Hut, and she still goes with her desperate idea to get her powers back, only to try and redeem herself later in front of Geralt to argument her actions. Jaskier is still the comic relief of the series. You see him as a broken man who tries to deal with Geralt abandoning their friendship, but he instantly forgives and proves he is a best friend when Geralt needs his help. There is a nice evolution to the main characters, giving them an interesting arc and making them deal with problems that are specific to their abilities and personalities. You see this evolution in other characters that appears from the previous season, like Istred, Cahir, Fringilla, Tisaya or Triss. It gives a nice feeling of continuity and maturity to the characters. Another example of continuity is the return of smaller characters that now have a greater role into the story, like the young elf Dara, who saved Ciri from eating poisonous berries in the first season, now is a spy for Dijkstra, or the group of dwarves led by Yarp and Sigrid that Geralt met during the hunt of the Golden Dragon. Now they return to help Geralt find and save Ciri from the Yennefer's bad intent. There is a nice, very nice feeling of nostalgia, to put it like this, when you see those characters coming back, even for a few moments on screen. As for the new characters like Dijkstra, Rience or Francesca, the elf leader, their character arc is interesting and tragic at the same time. Francesca has to give birth to a daughter only to be killed in her bed, so Francesca starts to get revenge for her daughter, only she gets revenge against the wrong people. Rience has the same arc as in the novels, so you see him as this maniac sorcerer who uses fire in order to do the problems around the town. And Dijkstra is so loyal to the source material that you instantly hate him from the moment you see him on the screen. As a side note, I really think that Graham McTavish was the perfect choice for the role of Dijkstra. I don't think anyone will make the character as hateful as it was supposed to be other than him. All those small additions and evolutions to the returning and the new characters makes the intrigue better in my opinion. There is a lack of logic here and there in their actions, but in a way, probably you may pass them and see the bigger picture and understand the story the actors present with their performance. I will not talk about the cinematography of the series because it maintains the same style and concept as the first season. The fight scenes are made in the same way as before. Probably some of them are more interesting and dynamic, but overall, when it comes to the combat, the series really exceeds the expectations. The fight with the monsters is quite well made and is made quite credible. I like the fact the series presents heavy themes like racism towards a certain race, or the fact that everyone has secret reasons for not to be trusted regarding an enemy or a friend, creating dangerous context at every step Geralt is taking. If you think overall of this season, the Witcher series added a lot of things original or connected with the original lore. Sure, they made quite a few changes compared with the official story, but after all, it is an adaptation, not a visualization. It has an interesting evolution of the character, good songs sang from Jaskier, although I think they are not that impactful as Toss a Coin to Your Witcher, even though the songs are evolving Jaskier's repertoire. It has good fight scenes, but it has also bad logic in certain moments. It presents the political context more than the story of Geralt and Ciri, and made an important reveal much earlier than it was necessary in my opinion. Now, as I said when I talked about the first season, those changes were made well, they were logical and combined properly with the initial idea? I don't know. There are things that present good ideas, there are other things that don't make sense at all, like it is left in a way to explain in a possible future what they mean, but overall, I really don't know. I am a fan of the Witcher franchise and I watched the first season and I enjoyed it. I cannot say that I did not enjoy the second one, because most of its story was okay, but I can say that the story started to become unique in its own style. It deviated a bit, well, a bit more, from the lore, and the story tries to become its own content, its own world. It's not a bad thing most of the time, if it's done properly. I don't know what to think about the second season of The Witcher. Probably I have to wait to see how the story evolves from this point in order to say if the second season was an interesting idea, or if it was just to be made. Maybe the future season will keep the interest of the viewer, or it will lose it completely. I have to see the next season to understand this one better. Until then, I will think to the story of the whole series and see if my initial ideas were right, or I missed something. Something that may change my view upon the Netflix's version of the story.